Everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. It's a mompreneurs and parent entrepreneurs podcast where we are here to share the stories of hidden gems about parents who are entrepreneurs who are making their journey. Uh, they come here to share their stories, their motivations, how could they able to do the art of juggling with both the hardships of parenthood and entrepreneurship. So today we have Synne Lindén. She's a content writer and is amazing storyteller, and she never hides telling the good and bad side of life in LinkedIn. And welcome, Synne, to our today's podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be talking with you today.
Same here. So, for the audience, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you actually started your journey towards the storytelling aspect of it and the content writing aspect of
Right. Sure. So my journey, I think, started quite early, at least compared to a lot of people who end up as entrepreneurs. I decided that I wanted to write stories when I was 6,
it. Mm-hmm.
and it was a passion that continued for me throughout my childhood and throughout my teenage years. And then I decided to pursue writing at university. So I have a double degree in creative writing and professional writing. Now, the dream has kind of always been to be a novelist,
Mm-hmm.
and that's still something I'm pursuing. But I kind of realized that I really like people, and so sitting alone and writing by myself always isn't really conducive for a happy life for me. I need to talk to people and be social, and so LinderTree, my business, was born out of this. Basically, the concept of taking principles from creative writing and applying them to business communications. And obviously, writing is storytelling. At least if you want to do good writing, you should tell a story, incorporate storytelling techniques, anything to get that kind of human communications going. And so, yeah, I started freelancing when I was, I mean, almost a decade ago. And then my business kind of has taken shape in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years.
Hmm.
So that's, I think, a quick rundown of the of the journey.
It's quite amazing how the passion that actually blossomed in the childhood becomes the actual profession for some of the people. Not much, not many people could able to take that into the realistic world. So it's really
Yeah.
glad looking at your aspect of the linden tree blossoming now after
Yeah.
so many years of your hard work.
Yeah.
Um, I see a lot of, especially in the LinkedIn post, where you don't hide, where you show the aspect of your personal life as a parent,
Mm.
as the art of hustling, versus, again, there would be some content on the professionalism. Why do you think it's very important, or at least for you, to share um, the content that shows that you both as a parent and both as an entrepreneur?
Well, of the basis of, I would say, good writing and storytelling is on some level honesty. It's being willing to be vulnerable, and being vulnerable means being honest about who you are.
Hmm.
And so the beauty of it is that what you will see, because in the beginning, that step is scary. It's scary to take the step away from the sort of picture polished professional facade that a lot of people like to sort of stay behind and not cross over that threshold where they're being personal and honest and kind of opening the door to their personal life. But when you do it, what happens ultimately is that that content resonates a lot more with people typically than the professional content does. And that is because by sharing in your humanity, you're appealing to other people's humanity. And that is actually what good communications, I mean, that's what I teach in my storytelling, in my creative writing, in all of the strategic work I do with my clients.
Mm,
It is about being willing to appeal to the humanity.
mm,
And that means you have to be human too. You can't, that's not a one-way street, you know, that's a dialogue and that's a conversation.
mm,
And I also think it is extremely important from a mental health and well-being
mm,
aspect, because it is so easy to get caught up in all the achievements and the successes and all the amazing things that people share
mm,
on places like LinkedIn.
mm,
And and it's easy to forget that that is one split second moment that you are being shown.
mm,
Whereas the reality of it is that person has probably had just as much, you know, struggle and falling off their horse and getting back up again as everyone else has, and daily struggle.
mm,
and and I think it's also part of who I am, you know? It's an essential part of who I am. Being a mother is a defining trait of my identity.
mm,
And so if I'm hoping to build a relationship with an audience and prospective clients and existing clients, you know, I have to be open about that and honest.
mm.
So yeah, I don't actually think I see any downsides to shouting about your parenthood, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. Um, I have understood it um, around 1.5, 2 years ago when I actually started to be kind of to be more active in LinkedIn. And there was one of the quote that really resonated with me saying that your journey starts once you step out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
And that is so well captured um,
Yes.
because, again, we are talking about the points that we are only showing the positive side of it, but it's so important to show the 99% of the hidden work
Mm.
that led to the 1% of the visible work. And
Yes.
even uh, I think it's extremely important now for people to understand, and especially for the Gen Z and the new
Mm.
generation, whether it's an Instagram or any other media, saying that if you see a company success or if you see a person's success, it didn't happen overnight. It
Mm.
is a constant struggle of adaptability and agility that person or the organization took for over years and months by a
Mm.
team or by a person that led them to there. And for example, i- I have a startup. If I say, hey, I have 20 companies, we have saved so many thousand of hours, we have saved so many dollars, it didn't happen overnight. it,
Yeah.
it takes around 200 to 250 calls to end up with the clients of 20 clients, you know.
Mm.
So
Yes.
and it's very important for the people to understand that.
Mm.
Let's jump into the freelancing and entrepreneurship. We see a hike of people adapting more to freelancing and
Mm.
entrepreneurship if they can,
Mm.
from the lifestyle they want to choose. We have seen a rise of people who are saying my time is very valuable for me, and I would like to take that risk of taking the adaptability, taking the flexibility in return to a certain less amount or considerate amount of a salary,
Mm.
cut. For example, we see more of work from homes. In the past few years, we have seen more of freelancing. Why do you think that we have been this have been adapted more and more in the recent years? From your perspective, from your journey, why did you choose to be a freelancer?
Yeah, that's really interesting. that development has been very interesting to see, especially since I've been freelancing for, I mean, not ages, but I've been freelancing for like 8 or 9 years now. Um, I think it is complex, as most kind of global developments are. I think a lot of it has to do with this um, rise of, well, social media on the one hand, as has had a huge impact. I think people making a living as YouTubers or influencers or bloggers has kind of made working from home kind of cool, or even, to be likened with celebrity status. So I think there's kind of that aspirational thing to it. Parallel to that, I also just think that it is, as you mentioned, a very substantial shift, and especially during the pandemic and the lockdowns, towards a focus on work-life balance, mental health, well-being, living a life that is whole. And for many people, that means living a life where you actually get to see your family. Especially in, I mean, I'm fortunate because I'm based in Sweden and Scandinavia. So I have we have laws that make sure that we see our families, but yeah. But in a lot of the world, that isn't the case. And so when people kind of see that, and then secondly, I mean, for me personally, it was when I realized that I can either work on someone else's dream and someone else's goals, or I can work on my own dream and my own goals and invest in me. Essentially, it's about that. Like, you can invest in yourself or you can invest in someone else. Because when you're an employee, yes, you're getting paid, but someone founded that company. Like, you are investing in someone else's entrepreneurial journey. And so for me, that kind of became this huge driving factor. And I think to a lot of people, that's really empowering when you're like, whoa, I can work from home. I can do something I'm passionate about. I can, yeah, sure, I start at a lower pay than I maybe get from a salary, but I can work my way up and I can manage a work-life balance that's positive for me and my family. That's essentially, you're kind of taking charge of your own, I guess, kind of framework for existence. And I think that is something that people are discovering more and more and leaning into more and more. And as the world kind of, well, now it's reopening, but before the pandemic, the world was oyster. You could go and live anywhere and work anywhere as a freelancer. So there's the empowerment, there's the freedom, there's the flexibility. And I mean, as a parent, just last night, my daughter was awake from 2:30 a.m. till 5 a.m. in the morning. So which basically never happens, but she has nights sometimes where she just is awake. And if I had to be at work at 8 o'clock, I would have had a horrendous day. But because I own my own business, I was able to tailor my day to that life situation, which would not have been possible as an employee.
And I have seen this kind of rise of mindset with a lot of parents and entrepreneurs. And the one thing that the audience who are listening to the podcast have to know, that it doesn't mean that you are working less if you're a freelancer or an entrepreneur doing work from home. It's actually a lot more hours. At the beginning, until you create that momentum and have that until your business is established, it's more work than a 9 to 5 job. It's more of that unseen and hidden work. Before, when you see a podcast or a post that is getting more responses because there have been hours and days of more engaging with the other posts. That's how
Mm.
people will know, and so on. So even for the business who are trying to establish, and who are the parents who want to be entrepreneurs, here is the reality check. Yes, it's going to be
Mm.
more hours of work. It's going to be more amount of self-motivating, self-driving, um,
Yes.
until we reach a point where either your business is established, or whatever goal you need to reach. And that is a reality check that people have to
Mm.
know. But that is in return to saying, this is my schedule for today. I want
Mm.
to only spend 2 to 4 hours on my creative work. And the rest of the day, I want to spend time with my kids or husband, or so on. So it's always that trade in until
Mm-hmm.
you reach to a certain stage, and um, that not most of the people get to understand.
Yeah.
Um, and that is very important that we are trying to tell through the podcast, is that here is the reality. This is what you can attain. And this is how much work it's going to be. Um,
Yeah,
so
it
yeah.
is very hard work. That is that is one thing that I will say definitely. Running your own business is, I mean, starting out as a freelancer is a lot of hard work. Running your own business is a lot of hard work. You know, you're always responsible for everything. I kind of usually I use the analogy of renting versus buying a home.
Right.
So when you're on your own business, you own the house, but you're also responsible for anything that breaks in the house, everything that happens in the house, maintaining the house, making sure the house is happy and the walls are painted and the windows aren't broken and everything. But it's your house. You own it. And so every time you invest in it, that's yours.
Mm,
Whereas when you rent, you don't have that responsibility, but you also will never own it.
mm.
And I mean, owning a house or owning a business is a lot of hard work.
It's a lot of hard work. Yeah, of course. There is a lot of accountability.
Mm,
The way I try to carve up the idea of a solo entrepreneur is that you are your best friend and your worst enemy,
yep.
right? So you have to self motivate yourself. You have to tap at your back. You have to say, it's okay if we did something. Maybe let's try a different strategy.
Mm,
Um, it's not always that it would work.
mm,
Sometimes we will fall down. We have to get up and keep moving on. But if we get depressed for every small step of failure, maybe solopreneur is not your material, right? So how let's please share your journey as a solopreneur when you started your freelancing. How you could able to motivate yourself? How was your journey? And how did you reach the point you are? What it takes to be a solopreneur?
right. So when I started freelancing back in sort of 2019,
Mhm.
sorry, that's completely wrong. 2013. I was a freelancer in the classic sort of, in the traditional sense of the term. You know, I would go on Upwork, which is a platform that
Mm,
posts jobs for freelancers. I would work for a very low hourly rate. And honestly, that is how it started in the beginning for me. I took jobs, I worked long hours, I took pretty much any project I was qualified to do, and kind of built my portfolio and repertoire. And some of those clients turned into long-term clients.
mm,
I think the big shift happened for me. Um, you know, for a while I was freelancing, then I set up my own limited company because I was a breadwinner for my family. And so it was important that I had a salary, that I had social insurance and everything that came with. And so then I kind of became an employee in my own company, so to speak. And that was about 4 years ago now.
mm,
the big shift, I think, to where I am now happened almost exactly a year ago. At that stage, I had been working, so that's important to kind of iterate. I had been working as a freelancer, as a writer for like 7 or 8 years. So I had, a big network, a lot of customers, a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of business development kind of under my belt already. But then last year, I kind of made the decision to pursue the writing that I wanted to do, because I was in a position where I could do that, because I had enough experience. I had enough knowledge about this, that, and the other that I needed. And that was when I kind of decided, that was the part of my entrepreneurial journey where I asked myself the question, well, what do I want to do? What am I passionate about? And how can I do only that? And that's, I think, a really important one to remember, is like, that happened 6 or 7 years into my journey, was when I could ask myself that question. I did not start day one with what is my burning passion and how can I do it? I paid my dues for many, many years before I was in a financial situation, before my business was in a situation, before I had a network where I could then say, I am going to do growth-driven creative writing and I'm going to do storytelling, because that is what I'm passionate about. That is what is fun. And then simultaneously with that, I put all of my kind of investment into LinkedIn, because I had then decided what I wanted to offer. I had figured out who my clients were, and LinkedIn was the most likely place for them to be. And then I started posting consistently 5 days a week. And that is what I've been doing since. So for a year now, I have been doing a lot of business development, a lot of shifts in my offering, raises in my hourly rate, which again, I could do. But that was when I started out, I got paid $20 an hour. So it's not this like instant thing. Yeah, it hasn't been for me anyway. And LinderTree is now starting to get to where I want it to be. So almost a decade after starting as a freelancer, I'm a business owner with a business.
What people have to understand, that it is a lot of years of hidden work and consistently shaping our expertise, gathering from our experiences, that leads to the people where they are at present. And it's not an overnight success, especially in the areas of creativity and in most of the fields like healthcare and so on. You cannot just jump in. It really needs that experience and expertise to move forward. Let's move on to the storytelling. That's your expertise. Let's break it down into 3 buckets. Because you are so much active in LinkedIn, we would like to wrap up the podcast with some of the tips that you can provide to the audience.
Right.
Let's jump to the entrepreneurship journey, the people who are entrepreneurs, the people who are startup founders. Why is storytelling so important for them, and how they can start?
So, why it's important for startups, especially sort of starting entrepreneurs, is twofold. The first reason is that it gets you investors, customers, audiences, sales, growth. And that is quite simply because stories are the easiest way of connecting with people on a human level. People buy from people they trust, and people trust people that they connect with. It really is that simple. And stories are a very kind of fast forward way of doing that. How to get started? I would say the best place to start is with your brand story. That is what I call your core narrative. And it is what would typically go on your about page, but it is also the kind of essence of your company's narrative. So it is kind of that foundational text that you can go back to, and you can take snippets from it, and you can take paragraphs from it, and you can emulate it throughout your entire communication strategy. And doing your brand story, I would say the most important tip I can give with your brand story is to remember that it does not have to be chronological. And you aren't actually telling a story about you. You are telling the story about how you became the best person to help your ideal client. So that's the narrative you're looking for. Yeah. Because a lot of businesses, they make the mistake, they only talk about themselves and they don't talk about their customer at all in their brand story. And then you're missing out on that connection that you need to solidify in that text.
Yeah, because it's not about us, it's about the customer.
Yes, exactly.
So, let's jump into the storytelling for if the startup is getting a continuous revenue stream model, but they want to, at this point, become part of Fortune 500, or they want to transform themselves from a startup phase to a mid-size organization. Do they need storytelling? And if yes, what kind of storytelling they have to tell at that point?
Yes, they absolutely need it. They need it for two reasons. The first one is, if you want to be making that kind of transition of growth, you're going to probably be having a lot of important meetings with a lot of big clients that will be that lifting, or customers or collaborators or partners or whatever. Now, stories that are honest sell. And so then you can sell your business as a partner, as a service provider, as a bigger fish than what you currently are. People love stories, and that goes for the corporate meetings too. You will remember it better, you will be more liked, you will create more trust. The second reason is that, and this is something that we're kind of seeing, this is an interesting trend that's been going on for a couple of years now. The really big companies invest in what I refer to as high-end content. And what high-end content is basically journalism for the company, storytelling for the company. They have their own feature magazine, they have their own editorial team, they have their own voice, and they have their own stories, and they share them to create this kind of, this community through the content with their audience. And that is the second reason. If you want to really level up and you want to grow, you need to build a community around your brand. Like, that's just a fact. And one of the best ways of doing that is by showing your audience that, hey, I understand you. I know what you like to read about or watch or whatever. And I tailor my content specifically for you. And not only do I tailor it for you, I spend a lot of resources doing that. So those are the two reasons for that bucket.
Why is content writing became so important? I know it transformed into different shapes and forms over years, but you see more of founders, more of, especially I'm talking about B2B, business to business kind of the market. For B2C, we have seen a lot of storytelling and content writing in Instagram and so on. But now we also see a rise of B2B stories, a rise of more of storytelling from B2Bs, kind of businesses and companies. Why do you think it's important for a B2B kind of an organization to still act more, to be proactive, to be consistent in terms of storytelling, in terms of content writing, whether it could be LinkedIn, Instagram, or whatever? Why do you think it's so important for B2Bs also to continue the story writing and content writing?
I think it is quite simply because even if you're doing business with a business, you're still doing business with people. It's still people doing business with people. And decision makers you know, however corporate they are, however $1 million deals it is,
Mm.
humans make decisions based on, a lot of the time, instincts. At
Mm.
least a big part of our decision is based on our instincts.
Mm.
And that's when that trust comes into the picture again. Like, it is such a cliche and it is repeated so many times, but people who trust you are so much more likely to do business with you. Certainly people who don't trust you, they will never do business with you. And gaining that trust, that kind of function, is exactly the same for businesses as it is for people to people.
Mm.
So when we meet a person, like, you know, in our personal life, who is open, who is willing to share, who listens, who's empathetic, who's understanding, that's a person we want to keep talking to.
Mm.
And it's the exact same in business. And, you know, it's interesting. Most of the vast majority of my clients are B2B,
Mm.
and they need this storytelling almost more, you know, because other businesses, it's kind of this dawn of humanity in business.
Mm.
And certainly the pandemic has really catapulted that, you know, because we have been forced to become vulnerable. So I would say the main reason is, whether you're a B2B or a B2C, you are doing business with people,
Mm.
and people really like stories.
That's a simple and beautiful way to keep it.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up with your final message to parents who are who either wants to go to the entrepreneurship journey, who are planning to start something by themselves, or who are already in the um, phase of this entrepreneurship journey. What would your suggestions would be for the parents?
Okay, parents, this is really hard for all of us. But the only way you are going to be a happy parent and a happy entrepreneur is by being kind to yourself, and by understanding that when you're spending time with your child, you are not neglecting your business. And when you are spending time on your business, you are not neglecting your child.
Mm.
You are wearing two different hats, and that is completely fine. And it does feel overwhelming, and it does feel impossible sometimes, but the only way to evolve both professionally and personally as a parent is by giving yourself that slack that you need to function. Because there are so many people who push themselves, and then they push themselves until they walk through the wall, you know, like they're so exhausted, and that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help you, it doesn't help your business, it doesn't help your children.
Mm.
So be kind to yourself, and remember that it is not either your child or your entrepreneurship. You know, they can coexist very beautifully, and in fact that is probably why you want to do it. So then make sure that you create a framework for yourself where that is what happens, and not the opposite.
Yeah, and very beautifully articulated. Coming from a person who is in Sweden and enjoying, I think Sweden is considered as one of the happiest countries people will obtain in the world, isn't it? Because I can see that. Thanks a lot, Sin, for your amazing time and golden nuggets of wisdom.
Thank you so much, Emma,
And
for having me.
sharing the value of storytelling and content writing.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. And thank you for shedding a light on this very important topic.
Yes, which is parent and entrepreneurship. It's a rough ride, but it's totally worth taking it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to build all the tools by yourself to ships of parenthood and entrepreneurship in this ocean of life, to be
Yes.
philosophically said. So, thank you, Synne Lindén, again, everybody. She's an amazing storyteller and a content writer, and she contributes her talent as a freelancer for both B2C and B2B. So, if anybody is interested, please do tap on her and contact her, and it would be such an amazing conversation. Handle both the
Yeah,
work life
we're pretty
balance.
happy.
Yeah.